today. We appreciate you joining us. We thank you for submitting questions ahead of time if you were able, and if not, you certainly will be able to type those in our chat box. Your chat box is easy to find. It's at the top or bottom of your screen. It looks like a little cartoon voice over your head, and it says chat, and you want to make sure it says to everyone in there when you make sure that you do that, everyone in the meeting. And we also want to thank our co-hosts today, the Cape Fear Council of Governments Area Agency on Aging with Holly Pilson. Hi, Holly. And Candace is joining us today. And at the end, if y'all would like to add anything, we will be so happy to have you guys do that. We really appreciate everyone joining us. We have several of these webinars that are available on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you search for Dementia Alliance of North Carolina, there's a lot of Melanie videos there. So you'll be able to see all kinds of Mondays with Melanie and webinars with Melanie and all kinds of education, so that we hope that you will do that too. We will send you a follow-up link and evaluation after this webinar, so you can tell us how we did, ask questions, and let us know if there's anything else that you need. So I'm going to turn things over to Melanie and let her jump in. Make sure that you look at that and put your questions in that chat. We can't have everyone talk, unfortunately. We have about 50 people today, and if we all asked our questions, we'd be here all afternoon, I think. But we definitely want you to be able to get those questions in. And like Melanie said, if you need to, you can email me. The link that you received was attached to my email, so you can just reply back to that email and let us know. So Melanie, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And the other resource I'll mention are our support groups, because our support group facilitators are very knowledgeable, and a lot of the people who attend our support groups have been through some things and really have some good strategies and some ideas. So I want to welcome everybody to this session on aging or dementia, and kind of what do they have in common and what's different about them. And take a deep breath, because y'all will be very happy to know that, oops, that's not what I meant to bring up. Y'all will be very happy to know that dementia and aging are not the same thing. So everybody just kind of take a deep breath, let it go. Dementia is different from aging. They're very, very different processes, but we need to know about them because sometimes they overlap. So the kinds of situations that'll get your attention, the kinds of things that you'll start to notice that kind of get you a little bit antsy, a little bit worried, a little concerned, are things like memory. So the person who usually has an ability to keep up with things, to remember appointments and things like that, you have phone calls with them and you start to notice that they're repeating the same information on the phone call. Or you have a conversation and that information comes up and it's like it's brand new. So you're noticing some changes in memory. You're noticing some changes in understanding of language. So someone who typically has a really good sense of humor is not getting the jokes anymore. So they're getting really very concrete, or they're not understanding the memes. Now, sometimes I've got to admit, I don't understand some of the memes that are out there, but this is someone who usually gets stuff and now they're not. Expressive language or their ability to use words. So I might be having a conversation with a friend and I'm 90 years old and I say, my grandchildren came to visit me last weekend. And let me tell you the truth, those children are impotent. Ooh, take a deep breath. Some of y'all are going, ooh, grandma ought not to be talking like that. But what did I really mean? Did I really mean impotent? Did I really mean impotent or did I mean something else? I really meant impertinent or impudent, or so. I'm not talking about my grandchildren being impotent. So I came up with the wrong word. So problems using words, and I'm not talking about names. The reality is, as a clinician, I'm a nurse practitioner. I pay very little attention to somebody's ability to remember names. Now, all of you take another deep breath and let it go, because if you're worried because you can't remember names, it's not a big deal unless you were in sales. Now, someone who was in sales who all of a sudden is having trouble remembering names, that worries me a little bit. If you're a politician, somebody who was in local politics and now can't remember people's names, that worries me a little bit. But generally speaking, names are kind of stored in different ways. Names is not really what I'm worried about. People are having changes in their understanding of time. So I say, I'll be back in a minute, or I'll come to see you later this week. And they say, well, when are you, call me the next day, when are you coming? Well, I said it'd be later this week. Well, so they don't kind of get later this week doesn't mean tomorrow. Understanding time, putting it together. It's been forever since you've been by to see me. Well, it was really yesterday, but it feels like forever. And I don't get that it wasn't forever. Changes in sense of direction. So these are people who especially start having struggles with getting lost, going to places where they're used to going, places where you would expect them to be able to manage, kind of getting around, managing appointments. So people who are usually on top of, I manage my appointments, I don't have any problem, that might be becoming more difficult. Or maybe it's not an appointment, maybe it's a birthday. And someone who's always kept up with those events is now making some mistakes. Maybe it's problems with initiation. And that doesn't mean joining groups, it means kind of getting started. So the person realizes that it's the middle of January, not long after the middle of January comes the middle of April. Shh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up, but you know it's coming. So tax day is coming, and they just can't get the initiation to kind of get that started, to get that process started, or they can't initiate getting things done around the house, or they can't initiate getting to some of those events that they know are coming. Insight. And this insight means I have trouble seeing myself in a realistic way, and or I have trouble seeing my impact on other people in a realistic way. So I either think I can do things that it's really clear I ought not to be doing. I think that at 82 years old, it makes sense for me to climb onto a step ladder, onto the kitchen counter, walk across to the other side of the stove, and get something off the top of the refrigerator. I think that's perfectly reasonable when I've got three children who live nearby. Not really reasonable. So trouble thinking about really having insight into what they're able to do when they should ask for help, or as I said just a moment ago, insight into the impact they have on other people. So I had a lady, and the first thing that worried her children, the first thing that really got her children's attention was she was out eating, picking up a quick lunch with the family, and they were at McDonald's. And she went to, at the end of the meal, she went and got herself an ice cream cone and came back to the table where all the grandchildren were sitting with her ice cream cone. Now, just drop in the chat real quick. What's wrong with this picture? That a grandmother would go to and buy herself an ice cream cone and come back without one for the grandchildren. Just drop in the chat what you think is wrong with that situation. So that part of the brain, that frontal lobe, also kind of goes along with some impulse control issues. So that might have to do with spending money. That might have to do with um, managing what I'm eating. Might might kind of look like some of us just living in COVID world. Because impulse control and COVID world doesn't seem to be really a very consistent thing. But impulse control problems. Um, Challenges with falls or other kinds of mobility changes, things that aren't really predictable, things that the person should be able to do. They've been able to do this before, and now it's not going so well. Changes in personality. So, someone who's always been kind and careful is now just saying things as they think them. Changes in social behavior. So people who've always been outgoing are now kind of getting a little more reserved. People who've always been really reserved are now in the middle of everything. So those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of changes I'm talking about, are those kinds of things. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute, and I'm going to ask you to just drop into the chat if you have noticed some of those things in some of the people that you're a little concerned about, or if you've noticed some of those things about people in your life. If that's what you're there, you've noticed some of those behaviors, some of those activities. So somebody put yes. I'm wondering, definitely put some specific ones in that you've noticed. And so now you're just realizing that she's had changes for longer than I realized. So, what specific, the time thing is what somebody added. So, just throw some things in the chat that you've noticed. Trouble with processing, saying a word and not being able to pronounce it for somebody who has been good at that in the past. And I'm gonna take away some of the scary in just a minute, using the wrong word. So glad, thank y'all for putting some of those in there. Says what she thinks and doesn't worry about others, and conversations on the phone, saying, thinking that you're doing and saying things behind her back. Um, Mom got on the bathroom counter and fell off, and trouble finding sentences. And so all of those things, you can kind of see where some of those things are really consistent with some of the things that I listed there. Now, did I say, before I go back, I'm gonna ask this question. Did I say, who remembers what the top of that slide said? Did anybody remember what the, and I will get the slide set to Lisa, and if you want a PDF of it, reach out to Lisa and we'll make sure that you get that, or she'll make sure. I won't do any of that, but she'll make sure you get that. Does anybody remember what the top of the slide said? You're noticing changes, you might be worried, or something like that. And someone added in taking longer to process information. So did that slide say, this means you've got dementia? Let me know, show me thumbs down, put up an emoji that says no. Um, and now put up a yay, because how many of y'all have had trouble getting your word out at some point? How many of y'all have had trouble controlling your impulses when there's ice cream involved? How many of y'all have noticed that you go somewhere that you usually go and you aren't really paying attention and you missed your turn and you wind up kind of getting turned around? How many of y'all have noticed that? I've noticed that to myself. I'm typically a kind person, and over Christmas, I said several rude things to people. Now, they deserved them. Don't get me wrong, they absolutely deserved. I was absolutely accurate in the rude things I said, but I typically wouldn't have said them, even if they were true, right? So you start noticing some changes, but I did not say that was dementia. So, everyone on the call, whether you've got your camera up or not, take a deep breath and let it go. Because all that means, I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to go back to that slide and let you see what it says. All that means is things you might notice. You are noticing changes. And what might those changes be? Well, those changes might be just part of aging. Is anybody on this call going to say, I am exactly the same as I was 20 years ago? Anybody gonna say that? Some of you might say, I'm a lot better than I was 20 years ago. Some of y'all might say, I'm different. It's not worse, but it's different. And some of y'all might say, I'm going downhill pretty fast. I need to make some more New Year's resolutions. Um, so it might just be part of the aging process. It might be something called mild cognitive impairment, which we may or may not go into. It's kind of going to depend on how the time goes, but it's something between aging and dementia. It's more than aging, but it doesn't really meet the characteristics of dementia. It might be dementia, which is this progressive, ongoing kind of issue. It might be acute confusion or delirium, which is a sudden kind of onset of change. It might be any one of those, but we still need to pay attention. So let's kind of start by talking about some of the differences between aging changes and dementia changes. Some of the differences between aging changes and dementia changes. Well, I put them up here in a way so when you get your PowerPoint, you can see them. Aging changes happen across your lifetime. So for some things, particularly like memory, your cognitive speed and your memory, take a deep breath, you peak at 25. So if you are over age 25, you have peaked as far as, now hear me, don't stop listening at that point. Don't go peak at 25, I'm done for. You peak at 25 as far as speed. Is faster always better? No, faster isn't always better because some of those fast things you do when you're 25 probably got you in some trouble. And you might better not be doing them. You're better off not doing some of those things. So these are changes that happen across your lifetime. The changes are changes of the quality of the ability or the skill. So it's a change in how well you can do it or how fast you can do it, but not if you can do it. So it might be you don't do it quite as well as maybe driving. So maybe you are not, the quality of your driving has changed because your peripheral vision has narrowed some. You might not be driving at night because your vision is changing some. The quality might change, but not your ability to drive because of an aging change. Or the speed of your ability might change. And aging changes are universal. And what that means is they happen to everybody. If you live long enough, you will experience this change. It happens to everybody, no matter, you can't get away with it. So are the three characteristics of aging changes. They happen across time. They're about the quality or the speed, not the absence of ability or skill. And they're universal. They happen to everybody. So if you kind of are the person who is intuitive, you know what this next slide is going to say. And what this next slide says is it's the opposite of that. So changes that are associated with dementia happen as an adult. So once you become an adult, if changes in your brain start to happen that are a certain type, a certain way, then those changes are considered to not be normal aging. So for it to be, it might be that it's not that it's hard to do a skill, but it's that you've lost the ability to do a skill. So let's pause here just a minute. And after we say it only happens to some, let's pause here for a minute and let's talk about memory as one of those changes. So the changes that happen with memory is as I get older, it may take me longer to store new information. As I get older, it may take me longer to get information out, but I can still learn new stuff. I can still get new stuff in, and I can still get out the old stuff. On the other hand, my speed might be changed. So if you're thinking about teaching one person in the family, you're installing a new piece of equipment, you're going to teach one person in the family how to use it. You want to get out of the house fast. Are you going to teach the 16-year-old or the 86-year-old? You can put it in the chat. You can just put in 16 or 86. So we've got one vote for 16. And I'm thinking if people were putting it in there, it probably would be a lot more than one person saying 16. There's some more 16s coming up. Thank y'all for making that happen. So the speed is different. It might take the older person some more practice to get it. It might take some more practice to learn how to use the new piece of equipment. You might not be able to just tell them over the phone. You might actually have to be with them, have them do it, try again, do it again, but they can get it. With dementia, the ability to get in the new stuff, particularly with Alzheimer's type dementia, the ability to get in that new stuff isn't connecting anymore. So it doesn't really matter how many times you try to teach that person how to use that new blood glucose monitor. It's not happening. It doesn't matter. You bought a brand new phone and it's really easy. It's one touch, but that one touch is just not happening. So people are losing the ability to get those new things in. So it becomes a real challenge for that process. So let's go back to the slide now. So should you worry? Now, this is the part where some of y'all are going to feel a lot better. Should you worry? And when I start to worry about people as a nurse or as a family member, when I start to worry is when I think about this, is this different for this person? Now, confession, I have no sense of direction. I have never had a sense of direction. I am never going to have a sense of direction. I was going to a colleague's home, and I've been there probably 20 times over the last year, and I still have to use my map to get there. I still have to use my Google Maps to get there. I have no sense of direction. Google Maps actually makes it worse, but we won't talk about that. That's another topic. Is it different? So if I am 85 years old and I'm getting lost, that doesn't mean very much. That might mean an awful lot for somebody else who's good with directions. So is this different from how this person would usually be? The second question in this group is, does it happen consistently? So anybody gets to lose a word now and then, right? Everybody gets a pass. Everybody gets to forget a birthday once in a while. Everybody gets to, except mine. You can't forget mine. I get really upset when you forget mine. The only time people got to forget mine was when Fran came through the hurricane, and that was because the power was out. So people got to get away with not remembering my birthday, but my birthday is important. But thinking about, does it happen consistently? And are there changes showing up in multiple aspects of the person's life? So if it's one thing, if the only thing you see is they tell you the same stories over the phone, I'm not as worried as if when they're telling me those stories over and over again, they're getting the wrong words out, or they're having trouble getting the right word, or they're rude to me when I say I have to go back to work. So I'm looking for changes that are in more than one piece of that person's life. So that's when I start to worry. And here's I'll tell you my true belief. And my thing is, if you, I call it the tickle in the back of my brain. And the tickle in the back of my brain kind of says, I need to know more about this. And I would say if you start to get that feeling that things aren't okay anymore, or things are getting close to not being okay, or if every time you get a call from your mother's neighbor, you wonder if there's a catastrophe, it's time. It's time to get it checked out. And that can be done in several different ways. And that may be something we spend some more time talking about if somebody is particularly interested in that. So it might be that you get it checked out during that Medicare annual wellness visit, because that is a time when everybody who is on Medicare should have a visit that doesn't look at a problem focus, but just looks at the whole person. It should be a medication review. It should be a physical exam. It should be a short cognitive evaluation. So if you're worried, get it checked out. Maybe you want to go see a specialist. There are some times when that really makes sense. So times to go see a specialist might be when it's a little unusual in how you're seeing the changes. For example, if you see the changes happening really suddenly, instead of kind of what most people notice is when I compare this New Year's to last New Year's, things are different. Or when I compare New Year's to the summer vacation, things are different. But if you're seeing changes fast, that might mean you might need to go see a specialist, or that person might need to see a specialist. The other is if you're seeing these changes in someone who is really young. So for me, really young is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And yeah, we have had people diagnosed with dementia in their 30s and their 20s. I think the youngest that's been really confirmed was diagnosed in their at 18. Now, I'm not going to get into the complications of diagnosing an 18-year-old with cognitive impairment, because if you know any 18 years old, they kind of are cognitively impaired, but it was a different kind of cognitively impaired. So if you have some of those unusual kind of presentations, unusual kind of situations, you might want to go straight to a specialist, and you might want to talk that through with somebody at Dementia Alliance to see, is this a situation where I can do it with my primary care provider, Medicare annual wellness visit, or is this something that I need to maybe go a different direction? And the reason for that kind of evaluation is because you don't know what it could be. It could be just simply the way this person is aging. So just like I can't count wrinkles like tree rings and know how old somebody is, I can't count processing speed and know if it's dementia or aging, because the way you live your life makes a difference in your aging. So if I'm a person who is very regimented, keeps a very intense routine, always does things the same way, um, I might not show my dementia. It might just look like aging versus a person who has a lot of variation in my day and I've got a really rich brain. It might be just normal aging. It might be this mild cognitive impairment. And I saw a question about that. So I didn't really read the question, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. And maybe if I didn't get it, you'll shoot Lisa an email or something. But mild cognitive impairment is between aging and dementia. For someone to be diagnosed with dementia, you have to have changes in two or more brain functions. So not just memory. Dementia is always more than memory. So changes in two or more brain functions. It has to be acquired as an adult, and progressive in a way that leads to a terminal disease. So that's for dementia. So if someone has something that maybe they can still do stuff, it's just really, really hard, but they can still do it. Or it may be someone who only has a little bit of a language issue, but all the rest is fine. That, or a little bit of impulsivity, but everything else is fine. That's what I'm looking more at mild cognitive impairment. Now, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. If your person has mild cognitive impairment, it doesn't mean you're off the hook, because about 50%, 30 to 50%, depending on whose work you read, of people with that mild cognitive impairment will progress into a true dementia across 3 to 5 years. So it doesn't give you off the hook, but it means we're not there yet. The other possibility that's up there is acute confusion or delirium. And what that is that's something that is treatable. So that might be related to a medication, or it might be related to depression, or it might be related to fall and there's a bruise on the brain, or it might be related to malnutrition or dehydration, or it might be related to having a stomach flu and now you're not doing very well recovering from the stomach flu. Um, the reason for that excellent evaluation is because it could be any one of those four possibilities. That's why when I say if you're getting worried, go ahead and do something, because one of the real challenges in this process is trying to figure out what it is when you don't know what's normal for this person. So if I've never done a memory test for this person and I get the results of the memory test, I don't know if this is normal or if this is not normal, because I don't know what normal is for this person. So I'm a big believer in getting that baseline early, and then you know what it might be. You've got something to compare it to. So should you worry? Maybe, maybe not. So if you are starting to notice some of those changes, if you're starting to be a little bit concerned, it's time to go ahead and get that evaluation. That evaluation is more than just, and I may add in a slide about this if somebody will remind me. That evaluation is more than just a quick doctor's visit or a quick visit with the nurse practitioner or the PA. It involves a history of the changes, a history of the person's health. It involves a physical exam with a lot of focus on the nervous system and the cardiovascular system. It involves looking at lab work for all kinds of things that can create problems. It involves looking at medications for all kinds of things that can create problems. It includes potentially doing some other studies. It might be looking at these carotid arteries and seeing if the brain is getting enough blood and oxygen. It might include getting an EKG to see if there's an arrhythmia or some heart damage that might be creating some of these changes. And some neuropsychological testing to figure out how is this person's brain working, and where is this person's brain struggling in a way that we can really objectively measure. So that does not take place um, in a 15-minute office visit. That really requires some time to really dig in. So the difference between screening is there's something to worry about. It kind of confirms there's something to worry about. And then that more detailed evaluation kind of helps us decide, where do we go from here? Is it normal aging? Is it mild cognitive impairment? Is it delirium or acute confusion? Or is it dementia? So
Melanie, what type of specialist would one go to is a question for that more in-depth screen, more in-depth.
yeah, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention, Heather. I appreciate that. So that could be some internal medicine, primary care, family care doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs have a population of people, a lot of older people. They've gotten really good at it. and they do a fantastic job at it. So there are some generalists who do a fantastic job with that kind of evaluation. Sometimes they actually do a fantastic job because if you've known this person across time and you start to see some of those changes, it can be a really good clue that there's something going on. So sometimes it's a generalist. Sometimes it might be a specialist. And one group of specialists might be a neurologist. Another group of specialists might be psychiatrist. A third group of specialists might be geriatricians. Some of it is going to depend on who in your community is really good at this, because not all neurologists are really good at diagnosing dementia. Not all psychologists or psychiatrists are. Not all primary care providers are. So finding the person in your community who really gets dementia, gets the process, gets understanding what they really are looking for and what they need to look for. How do you find that person? There are a couple of resources. You can call Dee Dee. Dee Dee is who I call. you know, Dee Dee is who I call, and I can make a commitment to you that if Dee Dee doesn't know, Dee Dee will find out. And sometimes Dee Dee reaches out to the family caregiver specialist. Sometimes Dee Dee reaches out to support group facilitators. Sometimes Dee Dee reaches out to other people she knows in the community. So it might be you call your family caregiver specialist in your area and start there because you already know that person and have a relationship with them. But find that person in your community or a nearby community, or some of you might be coming to communities that are pretty far away to get that kind of workup that that person living with dementia deserves, or that person with brain change deserves. Why bother? Why does it make a difference? Because when I was working as a nurse practitioner doing these kinds of evaluations, there were only a couple of people I saw over about 6 years who I couldn't do something to make their function better. Didn't say I fixed them all, but if someone has brain changing and wax in their eardrums and I get rid of the wax in their eardrums, their brains work better. If somebody has some brain change and they're depressed, if I manage the depression, their brains work better. So looking at that whole person can make a difference. So getting that evaluation might discover some other issues that when they're managed, function improves. And that's important. The other thing that's really important is it gives you an opportunity to have conversations. Conversations about what's really important to you. It gives that person with early dementia that opportunity to be involved with planning. And I'm not saying make promises that you're not going to be able to keep, but I am saying we can have conversations about, what's the most important thing to you? What are the really important things? We can have those conversations and that person can be part of it and can contribute. Also, the medications that we currently have available, even though they only treat the chemicals that are changing the brain, they don't actually treat the structure that's going on in the brain. The medications seem to be more effective if we start them earlier in the disease. So I believe in getting early diagnosis and knowing what we're dealing with so we can make plans. It gives us that time to make plans for that person to be involved in the plans. Somebody put in the chat Mars, and Mars is, I know many of you are probably from the Wilmington kind of coastal area. Mars is a wonderful organization. I've actually sent some people from Raleigh there who do really comprehensive evaluations on people who are noticing some changes. And I think they also do kind of that baseline assessment, kind of setting that standard. And they see just tons of people, and they are really good at figuring out where are the strengths and where are the changes. So that's a wonderful resource. So I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to reach out to Lisa and Heather, Dee Dee, if she's still around, and see if you've picked up on any other questions. I see one I can answer, which is yes, it's being recorded. And Lisa, is it going to be on our website, on the YouTube channel? Not the website, the YouTube channel. So it's going to be posted on the YouTube channel at some point. So you will have access to it along with all the other interesting things that you can go and watch and learn from.
Melanie, everybody that registered will get a link to the video on YouTube.
What Lisa said. So you won't have to go find it. But what I encourage you to do is when you do go look at on the link is check out the other things that are there. You know, look at the other resources that are on the YouTube channel, because there is some stuff about communication. There is some stuff about all kinds of different things. I can't remember what's on there. A lot of stuff about COVID that I put on there. Some stuff about when people don't really want or need help. Any other questions that seem directed before I start looking? Somebody said they're looking to where to take their mom. So reach out to Dementia Alliance or reach out to your family caregiver specialist in your area. So call Dee Dee. That's the only advice I give. I'm not much of an advice giver, but kind of consistently in my support group, the only advice I give is call Dee Dee is kind of my best advice.
Melanie, if anybody has questions after this that they would like to ask you, they can reply to the registration link that they got for this webinar, and I'll be happy to pass along those questions. So where you clicked on to join the meeting today, just reply back to that email. It's llevine@dementianc.org, and you've got that in your email, and we will get those questions to Melanie.
And Dee Dee is our Dementia Navigator and Director of Family Services for Dementia Alliance. That was a question. And so she is available to answer specific questions one-on-one and walk through this journey with you. She's absolutely fantastic. She's here today. So if anybody has follow-up questions that they specifically want answered, she is happy to work with you. And if she can't answer it, she'll go to Melanie, because she always refers to Melanie. But one question that we had, and I actually was thinking about this question too, Melanie, is what experience with COVID and dementia, and a lot of information circulating about the lasting effects of that. And I would think that would be one of the acute type situations that we have. Have you read anything?
Yeah, and you know, we haven't really had COVID long enough to really know long term, and so we're really figuring this out. What we know is that some people with COVID um, struggle for a while after they're, you know, better and they're well, with a kind of ongoing cognitive, and that is really scary, and it needs to be really evaluated. We just haven't had a long enough period of time to really dig into that and figure out what really is happening to people's brains. But some people truly do report that it's kind of similar to the fogginess that kind of goes along with after having chemo or after having some surgeries. People are really, it's more than just being fatigued. Their brain truly is not working as efficiently and effectively as it is. Some of that initially is definitely that acute confusion and delirium. You know, in that acute phase, it's definitely that, you know, people who have fevers, people who are oxygenating their brain, people who are really, really sick, you know, they're going to be, not going to be, but it's really common to be very confused with that. The people who are still struggling months afterwards are something we just haven't got enough of them to really understand and figure out what's going on with that. So that's for people who aren't older. People who are older, a lot of times for people who are older, we miss the early signs of dementia because they're able to compensate and adapt, because you don't live to be old without being flexible and adaptive. And so people who live to be older are people who can figure out ways to make things work. So if I'm 85 years old and I don't have dementia, I'm 85 years old, I don't have dementia, and I get COVID. So I get off of my routine and I'm sick for 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, I never kind of recovered. That may be in that situation that I wasn't diagnosed with dementia, but I was having changes in my brain that I was able to adapt to and compensate for. They weren't showing because that wasn't something I was using a lot. So if I'm always in the same routine, if I'm doing things the same way, if I don't get out of my tracks, it's sometimes hard to realize that that person is experiencing some brain change. So COVID is really complicated, just like hospitalizations, just like other kinds of acute or chronic diseases for older people. Older people who have dementia and get COVID, um, it has often a tremendous impact. And we're seeing some of them really, really, really struggle to get close to where they were before. So that's a little bit about COVID. There are some, I think I have 3 videos about COVID on the YouTube channel. I did them pretty early. I think we're going to go back and do a couple of updates sometime fairly soon and kind of get some more updated information, but the information that's on there is still accurate.
Thank you, Melanie. There's a question. When you use the word cognitive and you're talking about dementia and Alzheimer's, what exactly do you mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. See, I'm a nurse that I sometimes think I don't know things, but I use words that I think but yeah. So cognitive means thinking. So cognitive is the thinking part of your brain. So it is your brain's ability to kind of take in information and process it. It's your brain's ability to kind of think and use information and process information. It can even include things like speech and language and decision making and judgment and all that kind of thinking. Yeah, great question. Is there anything else pretty short that Lisa or Dee Dee see? There was there was one that I saw somebody put ahead of time that was about what do you do first, or what do you do after the person is diagnosed. And I would say pretty clearly, make a connection with an organization. My recommendation would obviously be Dementia Alliance, but make a connection with a group that can help guide you through. Support groups are fantastic, not just for support, but also for information and for resources and referrals. So go and join a support group. Go to the website and watch some videos. Set up a time to talk with somebody. Either, if your provider has resources, some providers have social workers that provide some resources, many don't. But reach out to find that community, because you can't do this by yourself because it's too complicated. You need to build a team of people to help you through it.
Right. Melanie, we have another question from Melissa. She says, do you know how our seniors are doing after their second round of the COVID vaccine?
Most of the people, my mom has only had her first one, So I can't answer, but she did great with her first one. Her arm was a little bit sore, but she did fantastic. What I'm hearing from my friends who work in, my colleagues and friends, healthcare professionals who work in long-term care, I was talking with someone recently in a building of 200, and about 197 of those 200 people agreed to get vaccinated. They had one person who had more than, just a sore arm. They had one person who got a little nauseated, felt really tired and run down, stayed in the bed for 2 or 3 days after the second one, but then was getting up and back out there. So it seems to be that people are tolerating it, as well as the flu shot. The flu shot is going to get some people aren't going to take that well. If you think about having two of them. Yeah. Great questions.
We are right at 3 o'clock, Melanie.
Ah,
So if I might for just a second, and Holly has the ability, well, she has my puppy in her lap to unmute maybe. Holly, could you just share your contact information with us real quick so we can make sure that everybody also has your information for the call?
Sure. So we're the Cape Fear Area Agency on Aging, and my direct number is 910-274-0339. And we have two really great support groups. We've been meeting via Zoom currently, but we would love to have you all get in touch with us. We have a new family caregiver resource specialist named Candace Lego, and she is on the phone, but she wasn't able to get on video. So I'm hoping she can join with the next one that we do. And I adopted this baby from Lisa.
Hi, Sadie.
Hi, it's Candace. Can y'all hear me?
Hi, Candace.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. You don't want to see me today. I look rough.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yes,
Candace,
but
is that
I'm
you?
here. This has been so wonderful. Thank
Great.
y'all so much for inviting me.
And we also have Austin from the Tar area, and he put his information in the chat as well. And I'll be happy to send all of that information out in emails to everyone so that everyone has that information for you. So we appreciate you all joining us today. We do have a lot of information and upcoming conferences. You can go to the Dementia Alliance website. I'll also send you a link for those. In February, on the 10th and 11th, we have a 2-day conference that's free for family caregivers. We'll probably have about 500 people in attendance, and it's about behaviors with dementia. And so we would love to have you join us for that. And again, we will send you the YouTube links so you can check out the Melanie videos. Melanie, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you all taking the time, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.